that you have questions or kind of categories or topics that you'd like me to talk about. So I'm curious where you'd like me to go. What's a good starting point for you? Yes, sir.
I work in a public school in the area, public high school. I work with teenagers, and I know that, it seems to me these times that we're kind of very with changing times these days, and young people are really asserting themselves and trying to find themselves and identifying themselves. And I guess I have a couple of questions. How are you interested in supporting these young people as they're developing themselves and asserting their independence, and and also, like, what is the school culture that you are interested in creating here at Northampton High School? So I guess they want me in how would you go about achieving that? Like, what are the steps you would take to achieve that culture that you have a vision for?
Okay, so question about school culture. What is an ideal or effective school culture? And I would describe the other half of your question as being kind of about how do we create opportunities for students to lead their own learning, but I think you're also going beyond that, just to lead as individuals, right? How do students how do we create opportunities for individual students to do that, and then as a community. So there's a lot there. We scheduled like 4 hours, is that right? So I guess I think school culture is really central, and I do think and talk a lot about it because it's sort of foundational. Students who don't feel safe in school struggle to learn, and that's pretty basic. So what does that mean, and what does that look like? What does it mean for students to be known, valued, and connected? That's kind of the starting point for me. And I think it's often really helpful to ask the students what that means to them, and then to think as a school community. So how are we designed to support that, and in what ways do we get in our own way? Schools are very rigid organizations, right? Bells ring. Everybody has 4 classes. And so how do we adapt when we know that learning is complex, takes place over different amounts of time for different students, takes place in different places for different learners? So how do we create a school culture that honors the...
Some people were having trouble getting in, sorry.
That's okay. So how do we create a school culture that recognizes all of that and honors the identity and individuality of each student, but also then builds community? Like how do we come together, and how do we take collective action on things that are important to us? So and the foundation to all of that for me is trust. And so it starts with, how do we build trust between adults and adults, because that's often the starting point, and then adults and students, and also among students, right? So all of the different ways you can go, and then from there, what is it we think is important to spend our time and resources on? Schools are sites of unlimited need and limited resources. So we have to be really thoughtful about what are we going to focus on? What are the things that we think are going to have the biggest impact in ensuring that every student feels a sense of belonging in school? And so I don't know where we are with that. I suspect that, educators, the staff here have been working really hard through a pretty disrupted 3 years to try and maintain that sense of belonging for students. And my experience of students today is that they feel some of that, and that they're hungry and willing to work towards more and aspire to more ambitious community work. So that's a start to the one piece of the culture question. The other part about opportunities for leadership, or and I think of it also in terms of students leading their own learning. So we prescribe a lot in schools of what students have to do, whether it's credits and courses, and so the design challenge is how do we, and a lot of that's mandated, right? We have to ensure students pass MCAS. We have to ensure they have so many credits in different disciplines, and a lot of that is valuable, but it starts to shrink the amount of flexibility we have to then say, so who are you and what are you interested in, and what would really inspire you in your learning? And I think we need to be asking those questions and then creating space for that to happen. And that can happen within a class, right? So you can, in a financial literacy class, you can ask, what is your career aspiration? And then let's work backwards. So what kind of jobs does that include? What is the compensation? What does it cost to own an apartment and own a car, right? So in that class I visited today, there's a way to start from what is the student's interest and connect the content that the teacher's working on them learning to their interest. But we can also go way beyond that to say, let's just define what is it that we expect students to know and be able to do as a graduate. And then say, there's lots of ways to learn that. And what you're studying as you learn those things can be really flexible then. But that's a lot of work from where schools typically are now to get to that kind of place. But there's a lot of opportunities along that pathway. That's helpful. Yeah.
Thanks for meeting with us after your long day before driving to Boston Green. I'm just curious, talk to kids from other schools where you worked. How did they describe you? Like, what kind of leader are you? How do you balance teacher support? Very engaged parents, complicated districts, it's been very hard few years, and the kids in the school. I'm just so curious what they might say, or how you would describe yourself as a leader that balances all of those things. And then connected to that, raising kids in this little progressive bubble in a very complicated world. Where is civics for you, and how would you inspire kids to sort of think bigger and think beyond, this little place where we're living?
All right, I think there were 9 questions there. So can we narrow it down to maybe, can we narrow it down to maybe 3? So how would students describe me? And how would I describe myself as a leader with students? And then civics, I like the civics part of the question, so I want to do that too. So it's so funny. I think at first students are a little confused because I smile a lot. Like my resting face at work is smiling. And it was really, honestly, comical because my assistant principal's resting face was a scowl. So we would walk down the hall together, smiling and scowling, and nobody knew what was going on. Like, should we be nervous? Something wrong. So then they get used to it after a while, and it's just Mr. Worley. I think that in my last job I had an advisory, and so I had 10 kids that I saw most days for a period of time, and I had a partner because things happen, principal's not there. But that was to me that was great because you're often standing in the hallway wearing a suit, and here as I think somebody may have may have mentioned or noticed, students are many students are very good self-advocates. A lot of students came up to me and told me what I needed to do next. I said, I need to get hired, and then we can talk. So clearly a lot of skills around self-advocacy, which is not, necessarily the case in every school. And I love that. But I think also like creating opportunities like the advisory where I can interact with students in more sustained ways is really valuable to me. So I also in that school created a group of advisory representatives. So each advisory chose a representative, and I met with them regularly, and I could bring them things that we were talking about as decisions. So basically the student union, a little bit bigger numbers, a little less formal in terms of the selection process. It was a little more like every 10 kids, somebody had to do it, right? So it meant it was a little more broadly representative group of students. But we could have sustained conversation over time over decisions. And then as that we built that and they got used to the idea, they could bring things to me to say, this is what students would really like. We really like the vending machines back. Like, can we have a conversation about it? And we had a structure in place to have that conversation, and we had built some processes. So it starts to get at the civics piece as well. I think a lot about, the role of schools in a democratic society, and how do we model democratic norms, which seem to be somewhat broken at the national level, but a lot of really good democracy happens at the local level. And so how do we model that? And there's a lot of complexity to that, right? There's a lot of agreements around making decisions and agreeing to accept the decision even when it doesn't go your way. So how do we do that? And how do we learn together how to do that as adults as well as students? So I'd like to think about those and work on some of that with the students.
How would they describe it? If I talk to a kid from your last school, they'd be like, oh, he's...
I'm terrible at answering that question. I'm so sorry. I'm going to call up a couple of them and say, how would you describe me? He's all, always smiling, little hard to read, and sort of try and avoid sarcasm as much as I might be at my core somewhat sarcastic, because it doesn't work. So that was like a really important lesson as an educator, but still like to be jokey. So here's a funny anecdote. I had at 7-12 school, middle school lunch, first lunch. The 9th grade science teacher would bring his class down and sing happy birthday to me during middle school lunch in the cafeteria. And they'd finish, and the middle school kids would be like, it's your birthday, woo! And I'd be like, it's April Fool's Day, right? Do you think Mr. Laporte's punking? Like, what? It is actually my birthday. But it was, so we'd go around in circles for years until they could figure it out. It's like the pool on the 4th floor, right? You all know about the pool. So, it's important to be light and have fun, and also take time to go, deeper and get to know kids. I'm not going to know 900 students. It's not practical, but to try and know as many, and in some meaningful context, trying to do some work together. What else? Yes, way back in the back. So I think the question, tell me if I'm getting this right, is, so the last 3 years have been really disrupted in schools in the world, and complicated. And so your question is, given that context, how do you build community? And how do you support the adults? Great, thanks. I think it's a really central question, and I'm not sure yet. And I think part of it is I want I'd want to hear more from faculty. I mean, we had an hour together, and it started to come up, but I think just the edges of it. I think one of the things that is impression or I wonder about is, to what extent have adults, there's a way in which in a challenge you step up and you do your best, but you sometimes sacrifice your own well-being in doing that. And so I think, I have a question about where are we individually, where are we as a community, and what is going to make the biggest difference to heal, to create trust, to make people feel like they can bring their best selves to work and support students. And I would be looking for help answering those questions. Like that's a complex question, and I'm sometimes I'm more than willing to seek help. And I think there's some really smart people who think deeply about how to recover from traumatic experiences. And I would turn to some of those folks to help me think through to help a leadership team or the faculty as a whole, and then decide, so what can we do to build strength individually but also as a community. A lot of what is important to me. So I think everybody deserves a coach. And so I'm describing like a coaching relationship, and I would seek out a coach in that domain in particular. But also, I think that a lot of what works best is working collaboratively. And I would really want to think about how do we create or what exists already as collaborative structures for adults to support each other. And if that's not robust enough, what can we do to build that collaborative culture? And again, that's to me, that's a big part of how we improve our practice is through collaboration. And it's not, it's not just, oh, we have this time together. It's structured and thoughtful and purposeful. But building that can create a real foundation where over time you can take on bigger and bigger challenges and stay strong. Yeah.
I wonder if the work in school sort of practices with adults and with students.
So the phrase in the framework I've only become familiar or has become maybe common in the last 6 years since I've been not working in a school. But the funny thing is that so we always said fair. So my assistant principal, who did a lot of the daily life and student behavior, our refrain was fair is not equal, and punishment doesn't change behavior. And that was like to say that a lot of times to a lot of different people, adults, students, adults, families, to get it to stick. But it was foundational to how we thought about our work. So I'm really appreciative of there being a much more robust and well thought out version of that kind of simplistic starting point. And I think it would be really important to me to see where are we and how can we incorporate the best practices in our school community.
Faculty as well as the students.
The leadership style. I guess, keep talking about collaboration. I hope that it would be perceived and that people would describe it as collaborative and distributed. So, I think a lot of the role of principal is trying to help make sure that the right people are in the right positions, in the right to do the work that needs to be done and have the time and resources to do it. So facilitating and supporting educators and staff and students to identify ambitious goals and say, so how do we work on this together? I really like working as part of a team. It's really important to me to have colleagues that I can work with. In the previous example around thinking about strengthening the well-being, it's really important to me. It's not my wheelhouse, and so I want to seek support and the best minds on how do we ensure that for the thinking particularly about the adults in that example. And I think students over time would say the same thing, that approachable and willing to listen and willing to consider a variety of perspectives, and then working hard to communicate even when the decision doesn't always go your way. Like why, how is the decision made? Can we revisit it at a later date? And again, trying hard to build structures and processes that make sense and are not rigid but adaptable and fit the context and the decision and the situation. So a lot of it, to me, a lot of my work and what I think about is, creating systems and structures that allow people to do their best work. You were waiting, I think.
Question one. Okay, what motivates you? Where you see yourself in 5 years, and what is your greatest accomplishment?
Oh dear, what? Okay. All right, so say them again and let me repeat them. Greatest accomplishment. 5 years. What motivates me? Great. That's such a hard question, greatest accomplishment. I mean, I've got 2 kids. And they're successfully not living at home. I feel like a win. As an educator, we did some really deep work in my last school in Pioneer around coming up with a set of 10, we called them at the time, learning expectations, and then developing a portfolio process where students were demonstrating their achievement of those. And the 10th one was contributing to a just and sustainable world. It's like, that's a beautiful sentence. And it was 10 years ago, and it meant a lot of different things. We'd had a long tradition of environmental sustainability in the school, and justice expanded that quite a bit when we added that word. And so asking students to identify artifacts and things that they'd done that demonstrated that expectation, that was kind of cool. And so that work of going beyond, so what are the disciplinary, the content knowledge that we expect students to have, to say, here's some really, these are the big buckets that we want students to be thinking about, and asking them to think about it. I felt I was really proud of the work, and that culminated in a portfolio and an exhibition, and the exhibitions were super cool. Yes. So that was accomplishment, and then I already lost track of the other two questions. 5 years. Please don't ask that. Here, Dr. Pearson Campbell, where will I be in 5 years? There you go. I'll be here. You know, I love the work of being a principal is the best job there is, and when I told I have a group of colleagues, friends who we've worked together over the years as a group, professional practice group, where we meet periodically and talk and work on a problem of practice together, and I told them and I was pursuing this, and a friend who's a principal said, it's the best job in the world, except when it isn't. So, you know, I'd like to be here. And the third piece, yes, ma'am.
So you have to take questions.
Got it. You're gonna tell me what the questions are?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So as to go, I agree with you. It was the best job in the world. And I got to do a little bit. I would be the employee of the office with the radiation process. And so I know if you did first of all, you know that it's not only the best job in the world, it's also really challenging. It's a highly engaging all the time. And I think it's probably safe to say that your job now is less stressful on a daily basis than the typical way of
There aren't a lot of NIASC crises. And
Yeah,
it's just, yeah. So yes, fair characterization was making me get back into principalship. You know, I really, well, most importantly, I'm the energy of a school like is unparalleled, and that's largely due to students. So I've learned a lot about what works in schools, and I give great advice, really good at advice, and then I leave. And you know, there's a sort of I just feel like I'd like to again practice what I've learned, and I think this is like a really rich opportunity that the things that I'm talking about tonight. Like nobody walked out on me so far. Maybe want to, but you know that some of the things that we're talking about like would be non-starters in you know, like we're going to keep doing the things the way that we've always done them. And SAT scores and college admissions, that's what we're going to focus on. That's not enough. Those are important, but I want to work in a community that's asking the questions that you're asking. Like, how do we inspire students? You know, they've got a heavy lift in the next generation, and we need to inspire them that they can build the muscle to make that lift. Sorry about the terrible metaphors. Yes, sir.
So will we find a newer Northwest kid in your job now?
No.
Okay. And being in the valley all those years, you probably had thoughts pretty much more intimacy with Amherst High School. But thoughts about strengths and weaknesses of Amherst High School and Northampton High School. How would you describe some of that?
Oh, well, it's a little hard for me to say a lot. I mean, I know a lot more about Amherst, having worked there and kids go through school, and then Northampton. So I'd be a little cautious drawing a lot of conclusions. But what I would say more generally is it's a blessing to work in communities that have such a high value on education. And it's also a real challenge. It was really interesting to me. I made the transition from Amherst to Northfield and communities, very culturally very different. The relationship of adults to educators was like profoundly different. Like it took me a while to figure out what was going on. It's like, oh. right? The people working in the school were the most highly educated people in that community for the most part. And in Amherst, that's not the case. And so the dynamics there get really complicated, and the assumptions that people bring to conversations about schools and learning, there's a lot to unpack in a college town that you don't necessarily have to do in a lot of places that defer to the school. Like, we assume that you're the professionals and you're going to do your job well and get good outcomes for our students, and different communities will define that differently, right? College admissions somewhere, career somewhere. But in a town that values education as much as Northampton or Amherst, like, everybody wants a seat at the table to say, well, it should look like this. And that can be really valuable because there's some really smart and thoughtful ideas. And it can also be a real challenge for educators trying to make, slow, steady progress under, difficult conditions. And, we're teaching high school 3 classes of 78 minutes with 25 kids. Like, that's a long day. And then on top of that, we're going to take on this really ambitious goal and figure out how to do something new. So, it's this delicate balance that I think is really challenging, and something that I would like to help kind of figure out. How do we honor that commitment to education, and how do we support the educators and students in the school to do their best work?
Well, about how long did you teach in a classroom?
I was a teacher for 5 years.
And
English and social studies. Yes.
So, at my core, I normally want to talk about like the inspiration question, the well-being question, but in terms of the seat at the table that I think a lot of people I've been hearing in the community or in the school community have on their mind right now is kind of a hot topic around standard-based grading. And I just would love for you to speak to that a little bit, because it's staff, parents, and students. So I've just been sitting and kind of listening, and I know that's a much bigger thing, but I feel like it's something that's up in this community right now.
Sure. So yes, it's what everybody wants to talk about, students and faculty. And I guess I want to take a step back to sort of the principles behind it. So grading is a piece of a larger puzzle, and to me it starts from what is a worthy objective, a learning target or objective, and in a course. And we need to start by naming what is it we want students to learn in courses, but also then as a school, because some of those things aren't discipline-based. They're transferable skills. They're dispositions, right? Not just academic content and skills. So are we clear what the learning targets are? Are we really good at measuring that with performance tasks, right? So a lot of the learning targets you can't measure with a standardized test. So you need to create tasks, performance tasks, and give students meaningful feedback. And so then, long before grading, hopefully there's a lot of feedback, and you're breaking out the feedback. There's the skills, there's the content, there's the disposition. So the feedback needs to include, can you write an analytic essay? Is the content of your essay responding to the prompt? Did you get it in on time? Did you attend to accuracy and editing? Like, so if you get a D, and that's what you're handed back, what does that mean? And if you haven't broken it out into those component parts and there's criteria, it can be really confusing as a student to know. So what do I need to do differently? And then are there opportunities to improve built in to that process? So grading is a piece of that puzzle that should include feedback, and it should also then include here's where you landed. but a lot of times also, and here's an opportunity because you haven't yet reached proficiency on something we think is essential. And here's the structure of how to continue to work towards proficiency. That's a lot of moving parts. And so the grading is one part of that. And I think it would be important to look at that whole arc and make sure that grading is accomplishing the goal that we're trying to make it accomplish.
That 545 online.
Okay, so how do I find them? You got the questions. Okay.
Were not seen very much and don't have a seat at the table. How would you include and find those voices?
Right, so how would you include voices in the community, school community that are not always seen and heard? So I think a lot about this, and I think it's really important to me. And you think about in a meeting, in collaborative work or in a classroom, some of us are really good at being heard. Right? We'll make sure our question gets asked and answered, or our opinion voiced, and then other people will wait for the opportunity. And if it's not in the design, they may not participate, and you can lose a lot of good insight if you're not designing how do we make sure that all of the voices are heard. And so I think a lot about, so you can be invitational, and there's very often, the folks who feel welcome will accept the invitation, and then others might not. And so thinking about how do we do outreach, how do we create opportunities, I think, one of the things I've used in the past frequently is focus groups. And so, you can do open invitation, but you can also think about, we're really interested in the perspective of the families of our multi-language learners. So let's create an opportunity where those are the caregivers we're reaching out to, and what are the conditions necessary for that to work, right? We need to start with translation, for example. Like what makes that a realistic opportunity, and what's the purpose? And is the purpose a match? Is it something that folks are going to think is valuable and meaningful to them? And then the outreach matters. A lot. There's a lot. Personal invitations go a long way. So email is great for certain kinds of information, but it doesn't get a lot of the important work done. And so thinking about what capacity, and a lot of this is a capacity question. So if this is something that we value and think is important, then we need to put the resources into it. Because what I just described isn't easy and takes a lot of time and effort. So trust, right?
Because I speak for myself, and I talk about on this table. It's hard to trust the system. The system has failed us so much. Failed us, and I'm saying us as our kids, our students. They have failed us. So it's hard to trust, especially when you say beautiful words. I mean, we fall in love with what you're saying, but let's see how can you really make it work? How can you engage? How can you make it? So we can trust you, and we can say, okay, you can go to that person over there. They're going to help you. Make sure you go and you tell them your issue. He's going to direct you to the right place. Okay, it's hard because I get in that boat, and it's hard. When I first thought I had that person that I trusted her, she failed me. She failed me with her decision.
Yeah.
So it's hard to trust in the system, and you need to engage in a way that you feel confident.
Yeah. So if I just want to summarize it a little bit. I think when your experience is that systems have failed you, it's really challenging to build trust, and it means a lot of work on the part of in this case, school, be any kind of organization, to be to really work to build that trust and to follow through and make it work, because the experiences are really powerful and they haven't always been positive. Another question.
Learners to address issues, but I'm sorry, how would we engage student leaders to address issues within the high school and in the formation of any policy changes? What role do you think students have in these conversations?
So what role do students have in policy and decision making? Yeah. So I would hope, and my plan would be that they would have a really important role. And so the way, again, I think the way I think about it is, you have to start by being really clear what's the issue? What are we trying to address? Who gets to decide, right? So students often think, of course, the principal can just decide. We can have vending machines next week, and we can get rid of whatever it is we don't like. And so being clear, who decides? And then what's the process of getting there? What will be the opportunities for input? Some things there will be some things that I get to decide, but ideally I would like that to then be a collaborative process with students and staff and educators working together. So trying to really think about fitting the process to the decision, and also getting to an endpoint. Because too often things get drawn on and just go on, and not like when you focus on process and you don't get to decision. So there's like a fair amount of process, and then okay, we're going to decide if we can't reach consensus. Here's what we do next. And so I think a lot of that is building structures. So I described the student union already exists. Like what already exists that we can use as whether it's input or decision making that includes students, and how do we get that out there so that if we decide this is a decision that the student union is going to inform the school leadership on, how do we support them on hearing from their peers? Like what structures exist? How can we give them opportunities to hear from their peers and really represent their peers well? So there's a lot of there's some great and this is kind of the fun of my last job is there's some schools that run with democratic principles and have faculty and student senates that have decision-making powers. Like that's aspirational, that's not coming in January. But that's fun to think about. Like what would it take to move in that direction? And there's a lot of room between here and a school constitution to move in that direction and use those principles as we make important decisions. Yes.
There's a real going you learn something there that we want to come out of life.
So what have I learned by visiting lots of schools that I would want to bring here? Is that the question? Yeah. So I think one caution is that one of the things I've learned is that there isn't this is going to work anywhere you go. Like it is incredible how idiosyncratic schools are, which is kind of also funny because you go to a lot of schools and it feels familiar, right? A lot of the same things happen. Bells ring, kids are in the hall, they go to class, they try and get out of class to go see their friends. Like, so at the same time, like what works, so for me, a lot of it is around like, what do we value? What's important to us that we want to focus our time and attention on? Once we know that, then I do have a kind of a rich, like, oh, we should go visit these 3 schools and see how they're doing it and bring back the best pieces for us. So, flex time is a good example for me. There's a lot of schools where that is like this powerful part of what the school day, and it's really working well. And from what I've heard is we're not there yet, right? Doesn't mean it's a terrible idea. What are you trying?
Fourth period.
Yeah, no, see, yeah, you want to move it to the end of the day. So we'll have lots of great debates about things like where in the day, how many minutes. But, you know, I think the idea is that school days really rigid. Creating flexible time opens up a whole lot of opportunities if we're not realizing the success of that yet. So let's talk to students, like what's working, what's not. Let's talk to educators. What can we do to advance the cause? You know, and some of it's like super simple, and I'm sure this is already the case. Like, it's so disruptive. If you teach 3 classes of chemistry, and on Tuesday, the second class is gone for 40 minutes for a class meeting, you're all out of whack for days. You have flexible time during the day, you schedule your class meetings. So there's like some really low-hanging fruit, right, that it helps solve, and probably that's already there. But you keep going up the hierarchy of need, and so we believe that students should have additional time if they're not yet proficient. Now we have flexible time built in where we can grab those kids who need more time with an educator to like figure out what do I need to do to work towards proficiency. You can extend learning for kids who are already proficient in what can they be doing beyond meeting the course requirements that would really excite them. So, you know, lots of opportunity, but it takes time, you know, agreement on what are our goals, what is it we think is important, and then how do we get there? How do we keep working, believing that, we talk a lot about growth mindset in terms of youth and learners. It also applies to adults as learners, and it also applies to organizations, right? So if we take that idea seriously, all of our work is going to be this, iterative. We're going to try something, what worked, measure success. What can we do better? Come back, try again. Yes, sir.
I think the school does a perfect job on a week-to-week basis. So the caregivers and parents about events and content and forms that we fill out and all of that stuff. On a semester by semester or year by year basis, I have less of a sense that I know what the goals of the school are and the outcomes we're trying to achieve are and how we're doing on them and what the plans are for improvement. And you alluded a couple of times to outcomes and SATs for college, application college admissions is easy to measure perhaps that we want everything that we care about. Can you talk about what you see as some of the key outcomes that schools are focusing on? How do you would, what are the things to measure and look at to assess them? Both from an educational and any other lenses.
So I think that there's a lot there, and the question is thinking about school improvement. How do you what are the range of outcomes that I would think were important? And also how do you measure those? And I think you were also asking about communication. And so I think some of the answer is about process, and so when I think about entry, there's like it's the middle of the school year and things are in motion and people are working hard, and so how can I fit in and contribute to this year going well for students and educators? But I also think about a parallel effort to say, so what is our 1, 3, 5 year objective? Like, if we're really successful in 3 to 5 years, because I'm here in 5 years, what does a student's experience look like? So I don't want to make that decision. I want us to do that. collaboratively, and then we start to build action plans for that. So, and you know, some of these. So if you think about belonging, right? It's complicated to measure sense of belonging, but it's worth if that's the thing that we decide is really important, then we can figure that out. And you know, there's a lot of different ways. Go back to focus groups, go back to, you know, participation in all kinds of different things. So you can come up with a bunch of things. A lot of it's asking students and educators. So, you know, if we want every student to have an opportunity to lead their own learning. So then let's define what does that look like? What does that mean for us? Every student's going to do a capstone. We have, you know, 18 students are doing a capstone this year. Maybe every student should do one in their 4 years of high school, where they're choosing a topic and, you know, investigating it with some serious guardrails of what that means and what the skills that they're demonstrating are. So I'm not sure, but I would like to, over, you know, some period of time, work on identifying what are, you know, the limited number of ambitious goals that we'd like to work on, and then do a lot of work on communicating and talking about that and using it as a framework for decision making. Right? If you're clear what your goals are, it really helps you then align resources, because you know, there's a million choices. So you need both principles and some goals to help decide. So limited time, limited resources, what are we going to work on? Sure. Yes, sir. Oh, it's really hard not to move around. So the question is, how, as a white male school leader, can I give examples of how I've supported students of color? Did I get it? People of color, great. So I think that, so a couple of things. I think one, from
Including me. I'm telling you.
We were members of.
I agree in some part with her, but you never that in writing or say it out loud. Like, I didn't know the kids that I taught.
We were members of an organization called the Minority Student Achievement Network. And so I, with another faculty member, person of color, we co-facilitated a group of students, and it was both to create opportunity for them, you know, students of color in a predominantly white school, to feel a sense of connection to other students who are having similar experiences, because the network was largely similar schools, you know, Shaker Heights, Evanstown, Cambridge. So I think for me, a lot of it goes back to what I was saying earlier, facilitating, creating structures and opportunities. Then we work with those students, like, what would you like to do in our school? Like, you've been inspired, you've seen these other schools, and they developed the students' idea was, one of the things that's really challenging is you get to high school and a lot of decisions have already been made. You know, a lot of things happen in middle school that narrow down your options in high school. And so their idea was they wanted to create a mentoring program for high school students of color to mentor middle school students of color. And you know, it was amazing. I mean, a really smart idea. And the schools were walking distance apart, so it was actually fairly doable. And so we worked with them, and we worked with the middles, like we could facilitate the adult part of that work with the administrators and teachers for them to be able to do that. So that's one example. But I also want to, the other part of your question is, I think or another way I think about your question is that there are a lot of white kids in this school, and the question applies as much, I think, to us white adults working with white students to understand their experience, their privilege, and their role in the larger society. And I think that's really important work for us to do as well. So I certainly want to elevate the importance of identifying and supporting students of color and other students from historically marginalized communities. I also want to make sure that we're doing the work with the white folks as well.
Thank you so much. It's quick.
Thank you.
All day from 8:30 to 6 o'clock. So our next steps, you'll receive an email from me in the email from my office. And thank you for coming out today. There'll be a survey out for your response from me, the candidate today. We sent it via Google. And I'm sorry you'll via Google, but it translates to all the languages that we have in our district. And some people say, why do you use Google? Because we have to make sure that we have all the different languages translated. So thank you so much for coming. It's been a long day, a long journey, but we'll know the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.